The signal died at 14:47 local time. Benimaru felt at first a sudden absence where connection had always been. Not silence. Silence implied something listening. This was void. He stopped mid-sentence in the council chamber. Cheyonne's hand went to her blade before she understood why. Diablo's smile didn't falter, but something behind his eyes went very still. "Lord Rimuru," Benimaru said quietly. The words hung in the air like ash. Tempest had protocols for invasion, protocols for disaster, protocols for war. They had never needed a protocol for this, their king simply gone. Not dead, the soul corridor would have shattered differently, screaming its loss across every linked consciousness. Not captured, no prison in their world could hold that presence without leaving echoes. Vanished. Clean. Complete. Cheyonne's voice cracked the stillness. "Where is he?" "Unknown." Diablo straightened from where he'd been reviewing trade agreements, his usual theatricality stripped away. The connection persists, attenuated, but intact. "Then we go," Cheyonne said immediately. "We cannot." Benimaru's tone carried the weight of command he rarely needed to use. Not without knowing where. Not without. The ping arrived like a stone dropped into deep water. It wasn't words, wasn't even images. Just confirmation, alive, distant, and beneath it, something that tasted like caution. Diablo tilted his head, processing. "CL-sama is compressing data. The bandwidth is..." He paused, and for once, his elaborate vocabulary failed him. "Severely limited." Another pulse. This one carried fragments unknown world concealment laws, maintained human form, and threaded through it all a clear directive. No gate without anchor. "He's alive," Benimaru said, forcing calm into his voice. "He's being careful, and he's telling us to wait. Wait." Cheyonne's grip on her sword made the leather creak. "While he's trapped somewhere we can't... While he establishes whether somewhere is survivable." Diablo's smile had returned, but it sat wrong on his face now. Sharp edges with nothing behind them. "Our Lord did not survive this long by rushing into unknowns. Neither shall we." Benimaru looked at the empty space where Rimuru usually sat. The absence felt personal, accusing. "We need to increase signal clarity," he said. "If he can send compressed data, we can build something to receive it better. Not a gate, not a bridge, just better ears." "An anchor on our side," Diablo murmured, "to complement whatever he constructs on his." Another ping arrived, and this time it carried something new. Not quite emotion, the compression was too severe for that. But urgency wrapped around patience. A contradiction that somehow made perfect sense. Holding. Ready on signal. Angry. The last fragment wasn't from Rimuru. "Cheyonne," Benimaru said carefully. "I'm not going to do anything stupid," she snapped. Then quieter, "Yet." They felt the next transmission building before it arrived. CL was learning the limitations, adapting. The data packets came sharper now, more efficient. Secrecy law violation equals cascade. Failure human form, necessary constructing Neo anchor, prohibit portal attempts. "She's protecting him," Diablo observed. "And protecting us from our own impulses." "We're his subordinates," Cheyonne said. "We should be there protecting him." "We are his subordinates," Benimaru corrected gently. "Which means we do what he needs, not what we want. Right now, he needs us to hold Tempest together and not tear holes in reality looking for him." The chamber fell quiet again. But this silence was different from the first. That had been absence. This was waiting. Benimaru moved to the window overlooking the city. Tempest sprawled beneath him, thriving. Trade routes hummed with activity. Goblin engineers argued over bridge designs. A group of young dire wolves tumbled past the guards, who didn't even bother scolding them anymore. All of it built on one principle: safety through strength, guided by wisdom that refused to confuse the two. "We'll construct the anchor," he said. "Enhance the soul corridor's reception without forcing a connection. Give him better bandwidth for when he needs to send more than fragments. And if he doesn't come back?" Cheyon's question was barely audible. Benimaru didn't turn from the window. "He will." "How do you know?" "Because he's never left anyone behind who needed him." He finally looked back at them, and his voice carried absolute certainty. "And right now, we need him to come home." Another ping arrived as if in answer. Still compressed, still cautious. But underneath the technical limitations and Ciel's cold efficiency, something unmistakably Rimuru came through. Patience, strategy, and beneath it all, a quiet promise. "I'm working on it." Diablo's smile finally reached his eyes. "Then we had best prepare a proper welcome. Lord Rimuru does so hate returning to disorder." "He's going to hate what we build to bring him back even more." Shion muttered, but her hand had left her sword. Benimaru allowed himself a small smile. "Then we'll build it anyway. He can complain when he's home." The three of them stood in the council chamber as evening painted Tempest in amber light. Waiting, planning, holding the kingdom steady while their king navigated a world none of them could reach. The pings continued. Regular, determined. It would have to be enough. For now. The Department of Mysteries had a smell. Not unpleasant exactly. Just present. Like old parchment mixed with something metallic, and the particular staleness that came from air that circulated but never quite left. Rimuru had been in enough sealed places to recognize the scent of secrets kept too long. He'd appeared in a corridor lined with doors. Black, identical, unmarked. The kind of architectural choice that screamed either maximum security or maximum paranoia. Possibly both. The wards had noticed him immediately. Not alarmed, precisely. More like the immune system encountering something it couldn't categorize. The magical structure of this world pressed against him, trying to read, trying to classify, trying to understand what he was. It failed on all counts. Ciel's voice arrived as pure data stripped of inflection. Analysis complete. Defensive protocol active. Recommend human form maintenance. He'd already shifted. Universal shapeshift settled over him like comfortable clothing. Androgynous features, dark hair, the kind of face that wouldn't stand out in a crowd until you looked twice. The magic around him calmed slightly, though it still watched. Suspicious, uncertain. Footsteps echoed from multiple directions. They arrived in formation. 6 figures in plain robes, faces hidden beneath hoods that seemed to drink light rather than cast shadow. No wands drawn yet, but hands positioned where they could draw them quickly. Professional. Prepared. Deeply uncomfortable with his presence. Identify yourself. The voice came from the tallest figure, gender indeterminate beneath the robes. Rimuru considered his options. Truth would cause problems. Lies would cause different problems. Silence would cause immediate problems. "I'm lost," he said simply. Lost. The word came back flat. In the most secure section of the Ministry of Magic. In an area that requires 3 separate clearances just to approach. It wasn't intentional. Accidental intrusion into the Department of Mysteries. Another voice, this one carrying the particular dryness of someone who'd heard every excuse. Original. The robed figures shifted positions, subtle, coordinated, cutting off exit routes that Rimuru hadn't been planning to use anyway. "We're going to ask you some questions," the tall one said. "You're going to answer them. Then we're going to determine what to do with you. And if I don't remember how I got here, then we'll help you remember." The threat wasn't even veiled, just stated, matter of fact. One of them raised a wand. Legilimens. The spell hit like a polite knock on a door made of reinforced steel. Rimuru felt the probe, delicate, skilled, searching for cracks in his mental defenses, looking for memories, motivations, methods. Intrusion detected, CL reported. Mental barrier engaged, access denied. The unspeakable lowered their wand slowly. "That's not possible." "Clearly it is," Rimuru said. "No one resists legilimency without training, extensive training." "I don't know what that word means." The silence that followed suggested they were reassessing, rapidly. "Obliviate him," someone said from the back. Rimuru didn't recognize the spell, but CL did. Memory modification attempt incoming, preparing countermeasures. The second spell dissolved against his mind, like fog against glass. The unspeakable who'd cast it made a small sound, not quite distress, but close. "Report," the leader said sharply. The charm didn't take, not resisted, didn't take, like trying to write on water. More silence. This one tasted like growing alarm. "What are you?" The leader's voice had shed its professional distance. "Honestly, still figuring that out myself." A door opened behind the unspeakables. The group parted instantly, a deference so ingrained it was probably unconscious. The man who stepped through moved like someone who'd stopped worrying about dignity and found something more useful instead. Tall, elderly, ridiculous beard. Eyes that saw too much and forgave too little. Rimuru recognized power when he saw it. Not the flashy kind. The kind that held systems together through sheer presence. "Headmaster," the lead unspeakable said. Relief evident even through the professional monotone. The old man's gaze settled on Rimuru, measured, curious. Not particularly surprised, which was interesting in itself. "An unexpected visitor," he said mildly. "In an area where visitors are by definition impossible. So I'm learning." The unspeakables attempted to extract information. They tried, and failed. Apparently. The old man's expression didn't change, but something in his bearing shifted. A decision made. "I am Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Rimuru Tempest. An unusual name. An unusual day." Dumbledore's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "The department wishes to secure you, study you, potentially detain you indefinitely while they determine whether you're a threat." "Are you asking my opinion on that plan?" "I'm offering an alternative." Dumbledore turned to the unspeakables. "I request custodial authority under academic sanctuary. Hogwarts will assume responsibility for observation and integration." "Headmaster," the leader began, "the alternative is keeping him here. You've established that your standard methods of containment and interrogation don't function." Dumbledore's tone remained pleasant. His meaning was not. "How long before someone decides to try methods that aren't standard?" The unspeakables exchanged glances Rimuru couldn't read. He's a security risk, one said. He's a person who hasn't demonstrated hostile intent, Dumbledore corrected. Merely immunity to violation. I find that quite reasonable, actually. More silence. The kind that held negotiations Rimuru wasn't privy to. Finally, Hogwarts assumes full responsibility. Any incident will be addressed appropriately, Dumbledore finished. Thank you for your understanding. He turned to Rimuru. Shall we? Rimuru glanced at the unspeakables, still arranged in their formation. Still categorizing threat levels. Still deeply unhappy with outcomes they couldn't control. I appreciate the assistance, he said carefully. I appreciate the puzzle, Dumbledore replied, though I suspect you're less interested in my academic curiosity than in finding your way home. You're not wrong. That we have common ground. Dumbledore gestured toward the corridor. Walk with me. We have much to discuss, and very little of it should happen here. As they moved toward the exit, Rimuru caught a final glimpse of the chamber he'd appeared in. Deep in the department's heart, a doorway stood open. Beyond it, darkness that felt wrong, not empty, not full. Something else. Sound came from that darkness. Whispers, echoes, voices that might have been real, or might have been memory. Death Chamber CL noted. Unusual resonance detected. Worth investigating. Later. Rimuru filed that away and followed Dumbledore into halls that smelled less like secrets and more like old stone and older magic. Behind them, the unspeakables closed ranks and vanished back into their sanctum. Discussing, planning, reporting to whoever pulled strings in buildings like this. But Rimuru was already thinking ahead. New world, strange magic, laws he didn't understand yet. And somewhere in that darkness, something that resonated like home. Close enough to notice, too far to reach. Yet, Hogwarts appeared through mist like a promise or a threat. Rimuru couldn't decide which. The castle sprawled across the landscape with the kind of architectural confidence that came from centuries of not caring what anyone thought. Towers reached toward low clouds. Windows glowed amber in the fading light. The whole structure seemed to breathe, not metaphorically. Actually breathe. It has a heartbeat, Rimuru said. Dumbledore glanced at him. Most visitors don't notice that for weeks. I'm not most visitors. No, you certainly are not. They'd traveled by what Dumbledore called apparition, a wrenching sensation of space folding wrong, then snapping back into place. Efficient, unpleasant. CL had cataloged the entire process in milliseconds, already theorizing applications Rimuru knew they'd never use. The entrance hall was vast. Stone floors worn smooth by generations. Staircases that moved. Portraits that watched with interest that felt invasive. Students lingered in clusters, their conversations creating a low hum that echoed strangely. They noticed Dumbledore. Some noticed the stranger beside him. Whispers started before they'd crossed half the hall. Ignore them, Dumbledore said quietly. Hogwarts runs on curiosity and rumor in equal measure. I'm familiar with the concept. They climbed stairs that shifted underfoot, navigated corridors that led places they shouldn't, and finally entered a chamber that smelled like old decisions and older magic. The Sorting Hat sat on a stool, patched, worn, singing softly to itself in a voice like leather scraping stone. It stopped it when they entered. Albus, the hat said. Not a greeting, an acknowledgement. Old friend, I have a unique situation. You always do. The Hat's attention shifted. Come here, boy. Rimuru approached. The stool was shorter than seemed practical. Sit. He sat. The Hat descended over his head and the world went dark. Not absent of light, absent of everything external. Just Rimuru and a presence that felt ancient enough to have forgotten what young meant. Well, the Hat murmured. This is unprecedented. Silence. You're not from here. No. Not from here in the geographic sense, not from here in the temporal sense. The Hat's voice carried something like wonder. Not from here in the existential sense. That's accurate. I sort students into houses based on their nature. Courage, ambition, loyalty, wit. The Hat paused. You have all of these, and none of them. Your soul doesn't fit, I've been told. Not the magical framework, the framework itself. The Hat shifted, uncomfortable. It's like trying to categorize water by asking which vessel it belongs in. You're not refusing to be sorted. You simply can't be. Not here. Not by me. Rimuru felt the Hat's confusion. Genuine. Apologetic. I've sorted thousands of students over centuries, the Hat continued. Every one of them belonged to this world, even if they didn't know it yet. You belong somewhere else entirely. Can you tell me where? If I could, I would. But your soul carries echoes of a place my magic can't touch, can't name, can't reach. The Hat lifted slightly. I'm sorry. That's not an answer you wanted. It's an answer I expected. The Hat rose fully and light returned. Dumbledore stood exactly where he'd been, expression neutral. Well, the headmaster asked. The Hat sighed an absurd sound from felt and leather. I cannot sort him. His nature is incompatible with the mechanism. Incompatible how? In the way oil is incompatible with water, not through opposition, through fundamental difference. The Hat's tone carried finality. He should not be here, Albus, and yet he is. That paradox is beyond my design to resolve. Dumbledore absorbed this with the calm of someone who'd heard impossible things before and filed them under address later. Then we proceed with the alternative, he said. Guest scholar status, quarters, access to grounds and library, observation without integration. The Ministry won't like that, the Hat observed. The Ministry likes very little these days. Dumbledore turned to Rimuru. You'll have a room in the castle, freedom to move within reason, but no house, no formal place in the school structure. I'm fine with that. Most students wouldn't be. I'm not a student. No. Dumbledore's eyes held something that might have been sympathy. You're something we don't have categories for. That will make some people nervous. It usually does. They walked through corridors that twisted in ways Rimuru's spatial sense found personally offensive. Students passed, staring, whispering. A girl with bushy hair and sharp eyes tracked him with the focus of someone cataloging threats or opportunities, possibly both. Their path took them past a window, overlooking the grounds. In the distance, a lake reflected twilight. Beyond that forest, so dark it seemed to eat the remaining light. Rimuru paused. Ward detected, CL reported. Complex, layered, interfering with soul corridor transmission quality. The castle is warded, Dumbledore said, noting his attention. Ancient protections. They've grown particular over the centuries. They're blocking something. They block many things. It's their purpose. Dumbledore's tone suggested the topic wasn't open for immediate discussion. Your room is this way. The quarters were sparse: bed, desk, window with a view of grounds that seemed to change each time Rimuru looked. Not student accommodations, not guest rooms. Something carefully between. Rest, Dumbledore said. Tomorrow we'll discuss what comes next. And tonight Hogwarts gets used to you, and you get used to Hogwarts. The headmaster moved toward the door, then paused. One thing. The wards you noticed, they're not malicious, simply thorough. If you need to communicate with wherever you're from, tell me. We can make arrangements. He left before Rimuru could respond. Alone, Rimuru tested the soul corridor. The connection felt muffled, present, but strained, like speaking through thick walls. He concentrated, pushed carefully against the interference. The candles in his room flickered, shadows jumped. The door rattled in its frame. CL's analysis arrived crisp and certain. Ward resonance detected. Strong push equals strong reaction. Recommend compressed transmission only. Rimuru pulled back. The disturbances ceased. He sat on the bed and assembled a message, stripped of detail. Pure data. Alive. Stable. Investigating. Do not attempt contact. The response came faster than expected. 3 pulses. Benimaru's signature. Diablos. Shion's. Understood. Holding. Ready. Rimuru lay back and stared at a ceiling that showed stars that weren't quite in the right positions. New world. Strange rules. A castle that breathed and wards that listened, and a sorting mechanism that called him paradox. He'd worked with less. The stars shifted slowly overhead, and somewhere in the castle's depths, students whispered about the boy who couldn't be sorted. The stranger who appeared from nowhere and belonged to no house. They weren't wrong, but they weren't asking the right questions yet. Outside his window, the forest waited. The lake reflected nothing. And deep beneath the ministry, in a chamber of whispers and echoes, something resonated at a frequency that felt almost like home. Almost. Not quite, but close enough to matter. The library was a cathedral to organize paranoia. Rimuru found it on his second morning at Hogwarts, guided by a ghost who seemed offended by his existence and a suit of armor that kept muttering about proper procedures. The shelves stretched up into shadows that the floating candles couldn't quite reach. The smell of old parchment and older ink hung heavy enough to taste. He was 3 books deep into magical history when she found him. You're the one who can't be sorted. Rimuru looked up. The girl from yesterday stood at his table, arms full of books that looked ready to stage a collapse. Sharp eyes, skeptical posture. The kind of intelligence that didn't wait for permission. That's accurate, he said. Hermione Granger. She set her books down with the precision of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. And you're either the most interesting thing to happen at Hogwarts this year or the most dangerous. Possibly both. Rimuru Tempest. Unusual name. So I've been told. She sat without asking. What are you reading? He turned the book so she could see. A history of the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy. Her expression shifted. Not surprise, recognition. That's not light reading. It seemed relevant. Because you're trying to understand the world you've landed in, or because you're trying to avoid breaking laws you didn't know existed. Rimuru considered her. Quick, direct. Already 3 steps ahead of where the conversation appeared to be. Both, he said. Hermione pulled one of her books toward her, a thick volume with ministry seals on the cover. The statute isn't just law. It's the foundation of how magical society functions, or hides depending on your perspective. I noticed the hiding part. We have to. Her tone carried the weight of someone who'd argued this point before. Muggles, non-magical people, outnumber us hundreds to one, maybe thousands. If they knew magic was real. Panic, persecution, attempts at exploitation or elimination. Exactly. She paused. You understood that quickly. I'm familiar with the concept of power imbalances creating fear. Are you? The question came sharp. Testing. Rimuru met her eyes. Where I'm from, we've dealt with similar dynamics. Different specifics. Same principles. Where are you from? Somewhere the Department of Mysteries couldn't categorize. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Hermione studied him the way she'd study a particularly complex equation. The Ministry sent someone yesterday. Asked Dumbledore questions. He was very polite about not answering them. And that bothers them. It terrifies them. She leaned forward slightly. The Ministry runs on control and classification. You're neither controllable nor classifiable. That makes you a problem they don't know how to solve. What do you think they'll do about it? Observe, document. Wait for you to make a mistake. Her voice dropped. Then use that mistake to justify whatever they were planning anyway. Rimuru absorbed this. The girl was warning him, possibly testing him, definitely evaluating whether he understood the danger. The statute, he said, gesturing to his book. Breaking it brings what kind of response? Depends on the severity. Minor violation. Memory modification for witnesses. Major violation. She hesitated. Imprisonment. Trial. Potentially worse if they decide you're a threat to exposure. And I'm already categorized as uncategorizable. Which means they're probably debating right now whether your mere existence constitutes a violation. Hermione's expression suggested she wasn't speculating. You need to be careful, very careful. Because if you give them an excuse, any excuse, they'll use it. Movement caught Rimuru's attention. A portrait 3 shelves over had stopped pretending to sleep. Its occupant, a witch in elaborate robes, was clearly listening. The walls have ears? He said quietly. Hermione didn't look. The walls, the portraits, the ghosts, the suits of armor. Hogwarts sees everything. Most of it gets filed away as irrelevant student drama. But you're not a student. Guest scholar. Guest anomaly. She softened slightly. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to help you understand the playing field. I appreciate it. Do you? The skepticism returned. Because most people say that, and then ignore the advice. I'm not most people. No. She studied him again. You're really not. Which brings me to my actual question. Why are you reading about the statute instead of trying to find a way home? Rimuru turned a page, buying time to consider his answer. Who says I'm not doing both? Because if you were just trying to leave, you'd be asking Dumbledore about transportation magic. Or dimensional theory. Or whatever method brought you here in the first place. She gestured at his books. Instead, you're studying our laws, our restrictions, our boundaries. Maybe I don't want to cause problems while I figure things out. Or maybe you're looking for a specific kind of boundary. Her eyes narrowed. Something that resonates with wherever you came from. A thin place. A crossing point. Clever didn't begin to cover it. That's an interesting theory, Rimuru said carefully. It's the only theory that makes sense. Hermione pulled another book from her stack. I've been researching since yesterday. The Department of Mysteries has several chambers that study fundamental magical phenomena. Time, death, space, love, thought. She paused. If you appeared there, it wasn't random. Those chambers exist at conceptual boundaries. Rimuru said nothing. The death chamber specifically, she continued. It houses the veil, an archway between life and whatever comes after. One-way passage. But theoretically, if something could navigate that boundary, you think I came through there? I think you came through somewhere like there. And I think you're trying to find it again. She was too smart, dangerously so. But her analysis was already heading in the right direction. Better to guide it slightly than let it run wild. If I was, Rimuru said slowly, and if I needed to access that location again, what would stop me? The Ministry. No hesitation. The department is the most secure facility in the wizarding world. Getting in once as an accident is one thing. Getting in twice is impossible without authorization you'll never get. So I'd need another approach. You'd need information they don't control. Hermione tapped her book. Historical records, independent research, accounts from before the Ministry centralized everything. That's why you're here. I'm here because I'm curious and because... She stopped, started over. If you're dangerous, I want to know before you do damage. If you're not, I wanted to help before the Ministry assumes you are and acts accordingly. That's generous. That's pragmatic. But her expression suggested it might be both. A clock somewhere in the library chimed. Hermione glanced up, then started gathering her books. I have Transfiguration, but I'll be here tomorrow, same time, if you want to continue this conversation. I might. She paused halfway to standing. One more thing. That barrier you pushed against last night, half the castle felt it. The wards don't like being tested. How did you... I pay attention. She finished standing. Whatever you're trying to reach, be subtler about it. Hogwarts notices. And what Hogwarts notices, eventually, the Ministry hears about. She left before he could respond. Rimuru returned to his book, but his focus had shifted. The girl had given him 3 things a warning about political danger. A theory about dimensional boundaries, and confirmation that his attempts at contact were more visible than he'd hoped. All 3 required adjustment. He pulled his next book closer, a treatise on magical resonance and sympathetic connections. If the wards made direct communication risky, he'd need to find a frequency they didn't monitor. The portrait 3 shelves over had gone back to pretending sleep. Rimuru made a note to assume every conversation was observed going forward. In this world of concealment and scrutiny, privacy wasn't a right. It was a prize you earned through careful navigation of systems designed to ensure you never quite achieved it. He'd worked with worse constraints, but he'd need to be smarter about how he worked within them. The room of requirement revealed itself on Rimuru's 5th night at Hogwarts. He'd been pacing the 7th floor corridor, thinking about escape routes and defensive positions, when a door appeared where wall had been. Inside space enough to move targets that repaired themselves, and most importantly, no portraits. Hermione found him there 3 days later. How did you... She started, then stopped. Never mind. Of course you found it. Found what? The one room in the castle that actually provides privacy. She stepped inside, glancing around at the setup he'd created. Cushions arranged for cover. Clear sightlines, multiple exits. You're not practicing magic. You're practicing tactics. I'm practicing not dying. Bit dramatic. Is it? Rimuru gestured at the arrangement. Your ministry wants to study me. Your department wants to contain me. And according to you, there's a war brewing that nobody wants to admit is happening. Hermione's expression tightened. That's not inaccurate. So I'm practicing staying alive long enough to find my way home. She set down the bag she'd been carrying. Then you're going about it wrong. Enlighten me. You're thinking like an outsider facing threats. You should be thinking like someone teaching others to face those same threats. She pulled books from her bag. If you want to blend in, be useful. If you want to be useful, help the students who are going to need these skills, whether the ministry admits the danger or not. Rimuru considered this. You want me to teach. I want you to share what you know about survival, without making it obvious that's what you're doing. She opened the first book, Defensive Magic, the pages worn from repeated reading. There's a group. Students who want to learn practical defense because our actual defense teacher is useless. And you think I should join this group? I think you should help this group. Hermione met his eyes. Not lead, not take over. Just supplement. Show them things they wouldn't learn in class. What kind of things? How to move when everything's chaos. How to cover each other. How to retreat without panic. She paused. How to stay alive when the spells stop being theoretical. Rimuru recognized the weight in her voice. Someone who'd seen danger and understood more was coming. When do they meet? Tonight. But I need to know, can you teach without showing too much of what you can do? I've had practice at restraint. That's not an answer. It's the best one you're getting. Hermione studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Don't make me regret this. The group met in this same room 2 hours later. 20 students, give or take. Wary faces, determined postures, a red-haired boy who radiated protective instincts, a blonde girl with a dreamy expression that didn't match the sharpness in her eyes. And at the center, a boy with dark hair and a scar that drew attention whether he wanted it or not. Harry Potter. Rimuru had heard the name whispered in corridors. The boy who lived. The chosen one. Various titles that all meant the same thing. Pressure that would break most people. The boy looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Everyone, Hermione said, this is Rimuru. He's offered to help with practical applications. Suspicious looks, crossed arms. The red-haired boy Ron, based on the whispers, leaned toward Harry and muttered something that probably wasn't flattering. I'm not here to replace anyone, Rimuru said simply. Hermione thought I might be able to show you some things about staying safe when situations go wrong. What kind of situations? A girl with her wand already drawn. Suspicious, but engaged. The kind where spells aren't enough. Where you need to move, regroup, protect people who can't protect themselves. That's not magic, someone said from the back. No, it's survival. Magic is a tool. Tactics are what keep you alive long enough to use it. Harry spoke for the first time. What do you know about surviving combat? Fair question, loaded with subtext. Enough to still be here, Rimuru said. Enough to know that the people who survive aren't always the strongest. They're the ones who understand when to fight, when to retreat, and when to make sure everyone gets out together. Something in Harry's expression shifted. Not trust, recognition. Show us, he said. Rimuru spent the next hour teaching them things that had nothing to do with wands. How to read a room for exits, how to move in pairs so no one was exposed, how to retreat in stages instead of routing in panic, how to use terrain even when the terrain was a hallway or classroom. They were clumsy at first. Too focused on the magic, they knew not enough on the space they occupied. But they learned, adapted, started asking questions that showed they understood the principles beneath the specific techniques. Halfway through, Rimuru demonstrated something simple: how to redirect an attack's momentum instead of blocking it head-on. He used Ron as the volunteer, let the boy charge, then stepped aside and guided him past with minimal contact. Ron stumbled, caught himself, turned back with wide eyes. You didn't even use magic. Didn't need to. But if someone was actually trying to hurt you? Same principle. Use their force. Don't meet it. Rimuru looked at the group. Magic is powerful. But it's not the only tool you have. Your body moves, your mind thinks, your awareness notices. Use all of it. They practiced until exhaustion showed in sloppy footwork and delayed reactions. Rimuru called a stop before anyone got hurt. That's enough for tonight. When's the next session? The blonde girl asked. Luna, he'd learned. She watched him like she could see something others couldn't. Ask Hermione. This is her group. But you'll come back, Harry this time. Less suspicious now. More evaluating. If you want, we want. No hesitation. After they filtered out, Hermione stayed behind. That went better than expected. They're motivated. They're scared. She started collecting dropped equipment. They know something's coming. They just don't know what or when. Do you? I know enough to be scared too. She paused. Thank you for not making them feel weak. They're not weak. They're undertrained for what they're facing. And now they're slightly less undertrained. She managed a small smile. It's a start. Rimuru helped her clean up in silence. Through the window, he could see grounds darkening toward night. Somewhere beyond those grounds, the ministry observed and documented. Somewhere beneath London, a chamber held echoes that resonated wrong. And somewhere impossibly distant, Tempest waited. The compressed pulse he sent that night was brief. Progress. Allies, still searching. The response came faster now. The Neo anchor on Tempest's side was improving reception. Benimaru's signature carried steady patience. Diablo's held coiled readiness. Shion's vibrated with barely contained frustration. But they were holding, trusting him to find the path home. Rimuru stared at the ceiling of his quarters and thought about the students he'd just taught, about the war Hermione saw coming, about the choice between leaving quickly and leaving responsibly. He'd built Tempest on the principle that power meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. These students couldn't protect themselves. Not yet. Not against what was coming. Which meant he had work to do before he could leave. Even if that work delayed finding home. Some principles didn't bend just because the world changed. The vision hit Harry during dinner. Rimuru watched the boy's eyes go distant, saw the fork slip from nerveless fingers. Hermione reached for him first, but Harry was already standing, already moving, words tumbling out about Sirius and danger and the department. It's a trap, Rimuru said quietly. Everyone froze. How do you know? Harry's voice came sharp with fear and anger braided together. Because if someone wanted to lure you somewhere, they'd use exactly what you just described. Rimuru stood. But you're going anyway. He's my godfather. I know. Rimuru glanced at Hermione. She was already calculating, already seeing the same tactical disaster he was. How many are going? All of us, Ron said immediately. Then you need someone who knows the department's layout. Rimuru moved toward the exit. And someone who can get you out when this goes wrong. They use thestrals, Skeletal horses that smelled like graveyards and flew like falling controlled at the last second. The ministry rose from London's nightscape, all hard edges and darker windows. Getting in was easier than it should have been. Security designed to stop infiltration from outside, not students walking through visitor access with false confidence. The Department of Mysteries waited below. Rimuru felt it as they descended, that same wrongness he'd sensed on arrival. The air pressure changed. The quality of silence shifted. Magic here operated on different rules, and those rules were older than the building containing them. "This way," Harry said, leading them through corridors of identical black doors. "Wait." Rimuru caught his shoulder. "Let me check first. We don't have time. We have less time if we walk into an ambush blind." He pushed one door open. The room beyond held a vast chamber filled with glass spheres, each one glowing with captured prophecy, row after row stretching into darkness. "Spread out," Harry said. "Find row 97. They split up. Rimuru stayed with Harry and Hermione, tracking the numbered rows. 93, 95, 97. The sphere sat on its shelf like it had been waiting. Harry reached for it. "Don't," Rimuru said. Too late. Harry's fingers closed around the glass. Applause echoed from the darkness. They came from every direction. Black robes, silver masks, wands already drawn. Death Eaters, Hermione had called them. Voldemort's followers. People who'd made fear into philosophy. "Very good, Potter." The voice belonged to a woman with wild dark hair and a smile that promised cruelty. "Now be a good boy and hand that over." Harry pulled his wand. "Where's Sirius?" "The Dark Lord's prisoner, of course. Unless you'd like him to remain intact. Then I suggest..." "He's not here." Rimuru's voice cut through. "There's no prisoner. Just you and a trap that worked exactly as planned." The woman's attention shifted to him. "The anomaly. How delightful. We'd heard the ministry couldn't classify you." "You're going to let them leave?" Rimuru said calmly. Laughter rippled through the Death Eaters. "I don't think so," the woman said. "The Dark Lord wants that prophecy, and he's very interested in meeting you." "That's not happening either." She raised her wand. Brave words from someone outnumbered. The curse came fast green light that meant death without exception. Rimuru shifted left. The spell passed through space he'd occupied a fraction second earlier and shattered 3 prophecy spheres. Chaos erupted. Curses flew from every direction. Harry's group scattered, returning fire with spells that lit the darkness in stuttering colors. Glass exploded. Prophecies screamed their contents into void as their containers broke. Rimuru moved through it like water through a storm. Not fighting, redirecting. A curse aimed at Neville deflected into a shelf. A Death Eater's position shifted by the smallest push, throwing off their aim, creating space for the students to retreat. "Fall back!" Hermione shouted, understanding faster than the others. They ran, through doors that led to other chambers, a room of floating brains, a chamber with a tank of swirling time, Death Eaters pursuing spells carving destruction in their wake. Then they reached it. The Death Chamber. A vast stone amphitheater descended in tiers toward a central pit. In that pit, a raised stone dais. On that dais, an ancient archway. And hanging in that archway, a tattered veil that moved without wind. Whispers came from beyond it, voices that might have been memory or invitation or warning. Rimuru felt it immediately. That resonance, that wrongness that tasted like home seen through distorted glass. "Don't go near it," he said sharply. What is it? Harry asked, backing away from the edge. A boundary. Rimuru's focus stayed on the veil, between this world and what lies after. Death Eaters poured into the chamber. The woman Bellatrix, someone gasped, laughed with genuine delight. Trapped like rats. How perfect. We're not trapped, Rimuru said. You are. He moved before she could respond. Not magic. Just position. Placing himself between the students and the Death Eaters with the veil at his back. Drawing their attention, their focus, their fire. The curses came in a wave. Rimuru didn't block them, didn't shield. Simply wasn't where they expected him to be. Moving minimal distances with maximum effect. Each spell that missed him struck another Death Eater behind or shattered stone that rained debris on their formation. What are you? Bellatrix snarled. Leaving. Rimuru glanced back. Hermione, get them to the exit. Now. We're not leaving you. Yes, you are. His tone allowed no argument. This is what I'm good at. Trust me. She hesitated 1 second. 2, then grabbed Harry's arm. Move. The students ran. Bellatrix sent a curse after them. Rimuru intercepted it not with magic, but with himself positioned, so the spell hit the veil instead. The fabric absorbed it without reaction. Fascinating, he murmured. More Death Eaters arrived. 12, 24, filling the chamber with hostile intent and murderous attention. Rimuru walked calmly toward the veil, each step drawing them closer, tightening their formation around the dais. Nowhere to run, anomaly, someone called out. Not running. Rimuru reached the veil. The whispers intensified, recognizing something in him they couldn't quite name. Just making a withdrawal. He placed his hand near the fabric, not touching, just close enough to feel the boundary's texture. Ciel's analysis came instantaneous. Resonance confirmed. Death-life interface. One-way passage for biological matter. But dimensional echo accessible. Sample extraction possible. Do it, Rimuru said quietly. The air around the veil shimmered. Dust motes that had settled on the ancient stone began to glow with the same wrong light that had marked his arrival. Particles that had absorbed the boundary's resonance for centuries, now responding to focused intent. Contained, Ciel reported. Sample secured, sufficient for neo-anchor calibration. The Death Eaters saw something happening, but couldn't identify what. Bellatrix fired another curse. This one came close enough that Rimuru had to move. He did so toward them, through their formation. Not fighting, just moving with purpose that made them scatter from his path. Their curses followed, but struck each other as often as empty air. By the time they reorganized, he'd reached the chamber entrance. You're letting him escape, Bellatrix shrieked. I'm choosing to, Rimuru corrected. Then he was gone, sprinting through corridors he'd memorized during his first visit. The students had made it 3 chambers away before Death Eaters cornered them again. Rimuru arrived as Harry fell as curses carved the air into lethal geometry. He didn't announce himself, simply stepped between, deflecting, redirecting, creating openings for the students to move. Go, he shouted. I'll hold here. We don't leave people behind. Harry yelled back, bleeding from a cut above his eye, but standing firm. Rimuru almost smiled. Then make this count. They fought together. Students unleashing everything they'd learned. Rimuru ensuring none of them took hits they couldn't survive. The Death Eaters pressed hard but fractured under coordinated defense. Then help arrived. The fireplace erupted with green flame. Figures in different robes poured through. Sirius Black led them alive, furious, proving the prisoner had been fiction. The battle shifted. Death Eaters fighting on two fronts. Students extracting towards safety. Rimuru maintaining pressure until everyone had clear exit routes. He didn't see Bellatrix's final curse. Didn't need to. Felt it coming and moved aside. The spell hit Sirius instead. The man fell backward. Not wounded, not stunned, just falling. Toward the veil, toward that one-way passage. Rimuru moved. Not fast, not superhuman, just precisely. Catching Sirius's robe, yanking him sideways so his fall missed the archway by a hand's width, both of them hitting stone hard enough to bruise. Sirius stared up at him. "You, later." Rimuru pulled him upright. "Move." The chamber filled with more reinforcements. Aurors, Order members, the battle spreading beyond any individual's ability to track. In the chaos, Rimuru sent a compressed pulse home. One word wrapped in data anchor. The response came back strong, clear, ready. Neo Tempest had received the Death Chamber resonance sample. Now they could begin construction on their end. A way home. Not today, not tomorrow, but possible. Somewhere in the battle, Harry was screaming his godfather's name in relief. Somewhere else, Dumbledore had arrived with the kind of presence that made even Death Eaters reconsider their choices. Rimuru slipped toward the exit. His part finished. His objective met. On his way out, he passed the Death Chamber one last time. The veil hung motionless, whispering, waiting. But now, he had its signature, its resonance, its dimensional echo, close enough to matter. Almost home, not quite, but closer than yesterday. The Ministry tried to obliviate him 3 times in the week following the department battle. Each attempt failed with the same clinical efficiency. Aurors left looking confused. Unspeakables left looking concerned. And somewhere in an office, Rimuru had never seen people were making decisions about what to do with someone their standard procedures couldn't touch. Hermione found him in the library on the 8th day after. "They're going to escalate," she said without preamble, dropping into the chair across from him. "I know. Do you?" She kept her voice low. The library had ears, but it also had ambient noise that provided cover if you were careful. "Dumbledore's been blocking attempts to bring you in for enhanced questioning. That won't hold forever." "How long?" "Days. Maybe a week, if we're lucky." She pulled a newspaper from her bag. The Daily Prophet headline screaming about Dark Lord's return and Ministry denial. "They're scrambling, looking for control anywhere they can find it." "You're convenient? Dangerous. To their narrative that everything's fine." Hermione leaned forward. "What did you take from the Death Chamber?" Rimuru had been expecting this question. "Information." "What kind?" "The kind that might get me home." She studied his face. "And if getting home means leaving us in the middle of a war." "Would you rather I stayed and made myself a target the Ministry can use as distraction?" "I'd rather..." She stopped, started over. "I'd rather you didn't have to make that choice. But I do." Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just weighted with realities neither could change. "Harry's been asking about you," Hermione said eventually. "About what you are, what you can do." "What did you tell him?" "That you're someone who doesn't let people die when you can prevent it." She paused. "He wants to thank you for Sirius. He doesn't need to." "He does, actually. It's important to him." She gathered her bag. He'll be in the room tonight. Usual time. If you're there, you're there. She left before he could respond. Rimuru returned to his reading. He'd been working through accounts of dark magic, not for application, but for understanding. The text he'd found that morning had caught his attention specifically. Horcruxes. The word appeared only twice in the entire book, each mention hedged with warnings and moral condemnation. Soul magic at its darkest, splitting one's essence to achieve immortality through murder's impact, fragmenting what should remain whole. CL had been analyzing magical signatures since the department battle. Death Eater curse patterns, defensive wards, the strange resonance of the veil itself. But one signature kept appearing in the data. Incomplete, damaged, wrong in ways that suggested intentional violation rather than natural flaw. The signature they'd detected briefly during the battle, carried by Death Eaters, but originating from someone else. Voldemort. Rimuru cross-referenced what he'd learned about the Dark Lord. Disappeared after attacking an infant. Returned somehow through methods the Ministry still denied. Commanding followers who should have abandoned a dead leader. The pattern fit. You split yourself, Rimuru murmured to the empty library. Not as strategy, as terror management. Fear of death. So consuming it justified fracturing one's own existence. Creating anchors in objects to prevent true ending. Clever, horrifying, and catastrophically short-sighted. Because if the soul pieces remained, death wasn't possible. Which meant confrontation wasn't conclusion. Just inconvenience. He needed to confirm this. Needed to understand the mechanism. Needed talking to yourself. Rimuru looked up. A boy stood at the end of his table. Dark hair, green eyes. The scar that everyone pretended not to notice. Harry? Mind if I sit? It's a library. Seating is communal. Harry sat anyway, tension evident in how he held himself. Hermione said you'd be here. She's usually right about things like that. She's usually right about everything. Drives Ron mad. Harry's attempt at lightness didn't quite land. I wanted to say thank you. For Sirius. For all of us, really. You already did. During the battle. That wasn't thanks. That was battlefield shouting. Harry met his eyes. This is me after thinking about it, realizing you put yourself between us and people who wanted us dead. Multiple times. Without hesitation. Anyone would have. No. Firm. They wouldn't. Most people run from Death Eaters. You ran toward them. Rimuru closed his book. Your godfather would have done the same. My godfather nearly died doing the same. Harry's voice dropped. You caught him. I saw you move. That wasn't luck. It was positioning. It was saving his life. Harry paused. Why? Why what? Why risk it? You're not from here. You don't owe us anything. You could have let us handle it ourselves. Rimuru considered the question. The real question beneath it. What makes someone worth saving when you have no obligation? Where I'm from, he said slowly. I built something. A place where people could be safe. Different species, different backgrounds, different power levels. All protected under the same principles. What principles? That power means responsibility. That strength exists to shield, not dominate. That if you can help and choose not to, you're complicit in the harm that follows. Harry absorbed this. That's Not how most people with power think. I know. Voldemort certainly doesn't. The name hung between them. Most people flinched from it. Harry said it like claiming ownership of his fear. Tell me about him, Rimuru said. Harry blinked. Why? Because Hermione's right that I might leave soon. And before I do, I want to understand what you're facing. We're facing a Dark Lord who can't die. Can't or hasn't. Does it matter? Immensely. Rimuru leaned forward. Can't die means invulnerable. Hasn't died means protected. One is impossible to solve. The other just needs the protection removed. Harry studied him with the intensity of someone who'd learned to read subtext in survival situations. You think he's protected? I think power-obsessed individuals don't return from death through luck. Rimuru tapped the book he'd been reading. They prepare, build safeguards, create anchors. You know something. I suspect something. Knowing requires proof. What do you suspect? Rimuru hesitated. This wasn't his world, wasn't his war. Sharing suspicions about soul magic could cascade in directions he couldn't control. But Harry was looking at him with the expression of someone drowning who'd just seen shoreline. I suspect, Rimuru said carefully, that your Dark Lord has found a way to make death inconvenient rather than final. And that method involves fragmenting something that shouldn't be fragmented. His soul. Not a question. Harry already knew, or guessed, or feared. You've encountered this before, Rimuru said. Second year, diary. It tried to drain my friend's life to restore itself. Harry's hands clenched. Dumbledore destroyed it, said it was a memory, but it felt like more. It was more. Rimuru kept his voice level. And if one fragment existed, others might as well. The implications settled over them like frost. How do you kill someone who split their soul? Harry asked quietly. You don't kill them. You undo their protections first, find the fragments, destroy them, make them mortal again. Rimuru met his eyes. Then they can be ended like anyone else. You say that like it's simple. I say that like it's possible. Simple is different. Harry laughed. Bitter, brief. Right. Just find pieces of soul hidden God knows where, and destroy them with methods we probably don't know. Start with what you do know. The diary was one. Where did it come from? Who possessed it? That's a thread to pull. And if pulling that thread gets people killed, then you pull it carefully, with help, with preparation. Rimuru closed the book completely. You don't have to do this alone. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. And what if true doesn't matter when he's killed everyone who tries to help? Rimuru recognized that fear. Had felt it himself when building Tempest. The weight of knowing people would follow you into danger, because they believed in what you represented. Then you make sure their help counts for something, he said. You fight smart. You protect each other. You don't waste lives on gestures. Harry nodded slowly. Dumbledore says similar things. Dumbledore's survived a long time. That suggests he knows what he's talking about. Or he's just lucky. Luck is what people call preparation meeting opportunity. Rimuru stood. Room of requirement tonight. You're coming. Unless you'd prefer I didn't. No, I mean yes. Come. Harry stood as well. They'd like to see you. We've been practicing what you showed us. Ron actually dodged a curse in training yesterday. Progress? They walked toward the library exit together. At the doorway, Harry paused. When you go home, when you find your way back, what happens to the people you helped here? They keep being the people they already are. Stronger for having learned, ready for what's coming. That's not really an answer. It's the only one I have. Rimuru glanced back at the library, books holding knowledge of soul magic and darker things. But I'll do what I can before I leave, including helping you understand what you're up against. Harry nodded. Fair enough. That night, Rimuru taught them advanced evasion, how to read curse trajectories, how to use shields not as static walls, but as mobile protection. And later, alone in his quarters, he sent a compressed pulse home. NEO construction status. The response came clear now, almost conversational compared to early transmissions. 70%. Stabilizing dimensional echo. Coordinate lock improving. Estimate 3 weeks to functional gateway. 3 weeks. Close enough to count, far enough to matter. Time to make sure what he left behind wasn't ashes and regret. The school year ended in blood and confirmation. Cedric Diggory died in a graveyard. Voldemort returned in flesh, witnessed by Harry Potter and denied by a ministry desperate to maintain comfortable lies. By the time students departed for summer, Hogwarts felt less like sanctuary and more like fortress waiting for siege. Rimuru stayed. Dumbledore had offered quietly, and Rimuru had accepted for reasons that made tactical sense and emotional none. The castle emptied of students, but filled with preparations. Order members came and went through flu networks and apparition points. Defenses were reinforced, escape routes planned. War was coming. Everyone knew it. The ministry's denial just meant fewer would be ready when it arrived. You should leave while you can, Dumbledore said one evening. They stood in the headmaster's office, surrounded by sleeping portraits and instruments that measured things Rimuru didn't have names for. Outside, summer rain battered the windows. Neo Anchor isn't stable yet, Rimuru replied. That's not why you're staying. No, it wasn't. The students you trained, Dumbledore continued. They'll need those skills in the months ahead. But they'll need them whether you're here or not. I know. Then why risk the ministry finally succeeding in their attempts to contain you? Rimuru looked at the rain-dark grounds. Because leaving before the danger arrives feels like abandonment. You owe us nothing. I know that too. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. You lead people. Wherever you come from. You carry that weight in how you move. I built something, a community. People trusted me to keep them safe. And you did. Mostly. Rimuru's voice carried old grief. Not always. Not everyone. No leader saves everyone. Dumbledore moved to stand beside him. The question is whether you let that impossibility paralyze you or teach you. What did it teach you? That choosing who to save is the burden of power. And that burden doesn't get lighter. You just learn to carry it differently. The old wizard's reflection in the glass looked tired. Go home, Rimuru. Your people need you more than ours do. Your people are children. Our people are soldiers who happen to be young. Dumbledore's correction was gentle but firm. They've already chosen their war. Your presence might give them comfort, but it won't change their necessity. Rimuru knew he was right. Knew staying was borrowed time justified by diminishing returns. Knew the flu network flared green. Tonks stumbled through bleeding from a cut across her forehead. Dumbledore. Ministry's mobilizing. They're coming for the school. When? Now. Maybe an hour. She steadied herself against a desk. Fudge signed an emergency education decree. Says Hogwarts needs ministry oversight for student safety. He means control. Dumbledore's voice stayed level. How many? 20 Aurors? Dozen unspeakables? Fudge himself. Tonks glanced at Rimuru. They specifically mentioned securing the foreign entity currently housed without proper authorization. Convenient timing, Rimuru observed. Deliberate timing, Dumbledore corrected. They waited until students were gone, so there'd be no witnesses to object. What's the play? You leave? Through whatever means you've been preparing. Neo isn't ready. Then leave conventionally. Apparate to the continent. Disappear into Muggle populations. Dumbledore moved to his desk, already writing something. I'll provide documentation that you departed before Ministry arrival. It won't stop them searching, but it might prevent them justifying harsher measures. Rimuru felt the pieces falling into place. The Ministry needed a win. Needed something they could control and categorize. If they found him, the escalation would be inevitable. But if he vanished, they'll think you helped me escape, Rimuru said. Let them think what they like. They already suspect I'm obstructing their authority. Dumbledore sealed the letter with wax that glowed briefly before cooling. Better they focus on me than manufacture charges against someone who hasn't broken their laws. Yet, a slight smile. Yet. Tonks cleared her throat, not to interrupt the noble sacrifice planning. But we have maybe 45 minutes before this place is swarming with bureaucrats who have authorization to do very invasive things to anyone they find. Rimuru made his decision. I need 10 minutes. He found them in the room of requirement. The space had configured itself into something between planning chamber and memorial. Training equipment stored neatly, lists of defensive positions written on conjured boards, photos of students who'd trained there laughing between exercises. Rimuru pulled parchment from a desk and wrote quickly. Not instructions, they didn't need those. Not encouragement, they had enough people providing that. Just observations. Ron, your instinct to protect is good. Channel it into keeping others alive, not throwing yourself into danger, hoping to trade your life for theirs. Dead martyrs can't protect anyone. Hermione, you're smarter than most of the adults making decisions. Don't let them convince you. Wisdom requires age. Challenge assumptions, especially the comfortable ones. Neville, you're braver than you believe. The courage that shows up despite fear is worth more than confidence that's never been tested. Trust yourself. Luna, your perspective sees truths others miss. Don't let consensus reality convince you your observations are invalid. Different doesn't mean wrong. Harry leadership isn't about being the strongest or the chosen one. It's about making the hard calls and living with the consequences. Surround yourself with people who'll tell you when you're wrong. Listen to them. He left the parchment on the table where they'd find it eventually. Then returned to Dumbledore's office. Neo anchor status, he asked CL silently. 82%. Unstable but functional for single-entity transit. High energy cost. Requires precise calibration. Can you do it? Affirmative. Beginning coordinate lock. Dumbledore looked up from his preparations. You're leaving now. Before I become the excuse they need for worse actions. Wise. The headmaster extended his hand. It was an honor having you at Hogwarts Rimuru Tempest, even briefly. Rimuru shook it. Thank you for the sanctuary and the trust. Thank you for reminding me that power can be carried lightly. Tonks appeared at the office door. "They're at the gates." "Then I'm gone." Rimuru stepped back. "Headmaster, one request." "Name it." "The students I trained. If this goes badly when it goes badly, make sure someone remembers they learned to survive for a reason." He paused. "Make sure they get the chance to use it." "I will." CL's voice cut in. Dimensional lock achieved. Gateway opening. Duration 30 seconds. The air beside Rimuru split. Not violently, just persistently. A seam in reality revealing something that looked like home seen through frosted glass. "Dramatic exit," Tonks muttered. Seemed appropriate. Rimuru moved toward the gateway, paused. "Tell them." "They'll know," Dumbledore said quietly. "Go." Rimuru stepped through. The sensation was like falling upward through water made of distance. Reality compressed and stretched simultaneously. CL maintaining the connection through sheer processing power and borrowed resonance from the Death Chamber sample. Then stone beneath his feet. Air that smelled right. Voices shouting his name with relief and questions braided together. Home. Tempest. Benimaru reached him first, expression locked somewhere between relief and restrained panic. "Lord Rimuru, I'm fine." "You've been gone for months." "I know, I'm sorry." Rimuru looked at his subordinates, his friends, his responsibility. "But I'm back now." Diablo's smile held genuine warmth beneath its usual theatricality. "Welcome home, my lord." Shion was crying, not bothering to hide it. "If you ever disappear like that again, I'll try not to." Rimuru let himself feel the exhaustion he'd been suppressing. "How's Tempest?" "Stable, growing, missing its king." Benimaru's tone suggested they'd discuss the definition of stable later. But intact. Intact, growing, safe. He'd left them prepared for his absence. They'd managed, as he'd known they would. In another world, Hogwarts was being occupied by ministry officials who'd find only empty rooms and unanswered questions. Students would return to a school under siege. A war would escalate whether he stayed or left. He'd done what he could, taught what he knew, given them tools for survival. Now they'd have to use them. "My lord," Benimaru's voice carried concern. "Are you?" "I'm home," Rimuru said simply. "That's enough for now." Later there would be reports, explanations, decisions about whether the gateway could or should be reopened. But for now he was home, his people were safe, and the weight of leading in two worlds simultaneously had lifted from shoulders that hadn't realized how much they'd been carrying. In Hogwarts, rain continued falling on empty halls. In Tempest, the king had returned. And in the space between worlds, a connection remained. Fragile, purposeful, waiting to see if it would be needed again. The gateway opened at 2:47 in the morning. Rimuru felt it before CL confirmed a pull against the dimensional anchor they'd maintained dormant for nearly 2 years. Someone on the other side was activating the resonance. Calling, not requesting, demanding. Emergency signal detected. Source Hogwarts. Pattern suggests active combat situation. "Show me." The connection carried more than coordinates. It carried sound, screaming, explosions, the particular silence that followed mass destruction. And underneath it all, a sensation Rimuru recognized from building Tempest desperation measured in lives running out. "Benimaru," he said quietly. His subordinate appeared within seconds, already armored. "My lord, Hogwarts is under attack, full assault. They're calling for help." Do you intend to answer? Rimuru looked at the stable kingdom they'd built, at the peace they'd maintained, at the responsibility he'd spent 2 years honoring. Yes. Then I'm coming with you. No. Rimuru's tone allowed no argument. Tempest needs leadership if this goes wrong. You hold here. My lord? That's an order, Benimaru. Softer. I need to know home is protected. Can you give me that? Benimaru's jaw tightened. Then he bowed. As you command. Return safely. I'll try. Rimuru stepped through the gateway alone. He emerged in Hogwarts' entrance hall. Or what remained of it. The castle was dying. Walls breached, ceilings collapsed. Fires burning in colors that suggested magic rather than mundane combustion. Bodies lay in positions that told stories of last stands and failed defenses. Students fought alongside professors. Children who shouldn't know combat moved with the efficiency of those who'd learned or died. The training he'd given them showed in how they covered each other. How they fell back in stages rather than rout. But they were losing. Death Eaters poured through breached walls. Creatures from nightmares followed giants' werewolves. Things that had forgotten they were ever human. And cutting through it all, a presence that made the air taste like ashes. Voldemort had come to finish what he'd started. Rimuru moved through chaos without entering it. Reading the battlefield, identifying the critical points where the defense was fracturing. They're a group of younger students trapped in a collapsed corridor, Death Eaters closing in. They're McGonagall holding a choke point alone, bleeding but unbowed. They're Hermione coordinating evacuation while fighting off 3 attackers simultaneously. And there in the courtyard, visible through broken walls, Harry Potter facing Voldemort with the kind of exhaustion that came from being strong too long with too little support. Rimuru made his choices. He reached the trapped students first, 6 of them, none older than 15. Wands up, but hands shaking. Death Eaters advancing with casual cruelty. Down, Rimuru said. Rimuru. They dropped without question. Muscle memory from training 2 years old, but still functional. The curses passed overhead. Rimuru moved through the gap, not fighting the Death Eaters so much as redirecting their attention. A push here, a shift there. They turned on each other with friendly fire while he extracted the students to safer ground. Go, that way. Run. They ran. McGonagall's choke point was collapsing. She'd taken a curse to the shoulder, and her wand arm was wavering. Rimuru appeared at her flank. You, she gasped. You came back. Seemed like the day for it. He didn't take over her defense, just reinforced it. Covering angles she couldn't watch, creating space for her to catch her breath. When reinforcements arrived, Order members who'd fought their way through, he was already moving to the next crisis. Hermione saw him halfway through the Great Hall. Their eyes met for 1 second. Surprise. Relief. Questions that would wait. She nodded once, then returned to the fight. Rimuru worked his way toward the courtyard, methodically. Not the fastest route. The route that stabilized the most fracture points. Pulled the most students from certain death, created the most breathing room for defenders who were running on fumes and borrowed time. He reached the courtyard as Voldemort's patience finally broke. The Dark Lord had been toying with Harry, mocking, drawing out the moment. But something had changed his calculation, probably the realization that his forces weren't advancing as quickly as planned. Enough games, Voldemort said. His wand rose. Avada Rimuru stepped between them. The killing curse hit him center mass. For a fraction of a second, Voldemort's expression showed triumph, then confusion. Then something approaching fear as Rimuru remained standing. The green light hadn't bounced, hadn't been blocked, had simply stopped mattering. Analytical perception confirmed CL reported clinically. Death curse mechanism requires biological soul anchored to mortality framework. Subject lacks compatible framework. Effect null. Impossible, Voldemort hissed. You keep using that word. Rimuru's voice stayed level. I don't think you understand what it means. The Dark Lord's composure cracked. What are you leaving as soon as you stop trying to kill children? Voldemort's response was wordless fury made manifest. Curses poured from his wand in a stream of lethal intent. Dark magic that had ended bloodlines, spells that twisted reality into weapons. Rimuru moved through them like rain through fog. Not blocking, not tanking, simply existing in the spaces between destruction. Each spell that missed carved ruin into the castle behind him, but nothing touched him directly. You can't protect them all, Voldemort snarled. Every second you waste on me, my forces slaughter dozens. Then I won't waste seconds. Rimuru stopped evading, started advancing. Voldemort threw everything at him. The air itself became hostile. Stone melted. Shadows gained teeth. The courtyard transformed into a geometry of death. None of it mattered, because Rimuru wasn't fighting Voldemort. He was creating a problem the Dark Lord couldn't ignore. An opponent who couldn't be killed, couldn't be controlled, and wouldn't stop coming. He forced Voldemort to commit, to focus, to waste energy and attention on someone who wasn't the actual target. Harry, Rimuru called without looking away from Voldemort. The fragments, are they handled? Last ones destroyed. Harry's voice came from somewhere behind cover. He's mortal now. Voldemort's eyes widened. Understanding, horror, rage. You, not me, Rimuru said. Them. The students you wanted to break. They broke you first. He didn't give Voldemort time to process, just locked down the space around them. Spatial manipulation. Not a cage, he wasn't trying to trap Voldemort permanently, just creating a zone where apparition failed, where escape routes closed, where the Dark Lord had to stand and face the consequences of his choices. You're holding me here, Voldemort said slowly. Until the real fight finishes, yes. You can't kill me. Don't need to. I just need to keep you from killing anyone else. Voldemort's laugh was bitter, noble, futile. My forces will overwhelm this castle whether I'm present or not. Look around. The Dark Lord did. The battle had turned. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but definitively. Without Voldemort's direct presence, Death Eater coordination was fracturing. Students fought with techniques that shouldn't exist in a magical school. Evasion patterns paired coverage, tactical retreats that preserved forces instead of sacrificing them for empty gestures. 2 years of training showing results in the only test that mattered. They learned from you, Voldemort said, almost impressed. You taught them to survive. I taught them to protect each other. Survival was their choice. And when you leave, when this borrowed power fades, I'm not their power. I'm just someone who showed them they already had what they needed. Rimuru felt the spatial lock beginning to strain. Voldemort was testing it, finding weaknesses. Your mistake was thinking fear was the only motivation that mattered. Fear is the only thing that lasts. No. Rimuru's voice carried absolute certainty. Hope lasts. Community lasts. The choice to protect something bigger than yourself that lasts after fear burns out. The spatial lock shattered. Voldemort could have apparated, could have escaped to regroup and return stronger. Instead, he turned toward Harry with murder in his eyes. Rimuru moved, not to block the curse, to create the opening Harry needed. The boy, no the man, now had been waiting, learning, reading the moment. When Rimuru shifted Voldemort's angle by the smallest margin, Harry's spell flew true. Their magic met in the space between. Not just spells. Philosophies colliding. Fear versus hope. Domination versus protection. The connection held for 3 seconds that felt like hours. Then Voldemort's wand shattered. The Dark Lord fell. Not dramatically, not with a speech, just fell. Mortal. Defeated. Done. Silence spread across the battlefield like frost. Then someone Ron probably let out a whoop that broke the spell. Cheering erupted. Relief. Disbelief. The particular hysteria of people who'd survived when survival seemed impossible. Rimuru stepped back. Let them have their moment. Hermione found him at the edge of the celebration. "You came back," she said. "You called." "We didn't think it's been 2 years. We thought maybe the anchor had degraded, or you'd decided that I'd abandoned you." Rimuru shook his head. "I just needed time to make sure I could come back if you needed me." "We needed you." Her voice cracked slightly. "Thank you." "You would have won without me. Maybe. Eventually. With more bodies." She looked at the celebrating students. "You held him. Gave us time to finish it right. That's all I ever do. Hold the line until better people can finish the job." Harry approached bleeding from a dozen minor wounds, but standing straight. "Rimuru Tempest. You're real. I was starting to think I'd imagined you. I'm real. Just not from here. Are you leaving again?" "Soon. My people need me home." "Of course." Harry extended his hand. "Thank you for everything. The training, tonight, all of it." Rimuru shook it. "You did the hard part. I just made sure you had the chance." Dawn was breaking over Hogwarts ruins. In the growing light, the damage looked worse. Walls that would take years to rebuild. Losses that couldn't be repaired with magic or time. But also survivors. Students who'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. That strength meant protecting each other. That the choice to stand together mattered more than individual power. Rimuru felt the dimensional anchor pulling. Benimaru was worried. Tempest needed confirmation their king still lived. "I have to go," he said. "We know." Hermione's smile was watery but real. "Be safe, wherever home is. You too." The gateway opened one final time. Rimuru stepped through without looking back. When he emerged in Tempest, Benimaru was waiting. So were Diablo and Shion, and what looked like half the kingdom's leadership. "Well," Benimaru asked. "They won. And you?" "I'm home." Rimuru let exhaustion show. For good this time. The anchor. Closing it. They don't need it anymore. Shion looked like she wanted to argue. Diablo's expression suggested he understood. Benimaru simply nodded. "Then welcome home, Lord Rimuru. Permanently." Behind them, Tempest sprawled in morning light. A kingdom built on protection and community, on the principle that power meant responsibility. In another world, Hogwarts would rebuild. Students would remember the stranger who'd taught them to survive, who'd come back when called, who'd held the line long enough for them to win their own war. The dimensional anchor closed. Severed. Final. 2 worlds. 2 homes. One set of principles carried across the distance between. Rimuru had built Tempest on those principles, had shared them with Hogwarts, had proved they worked in worlds that had never heard of slimes or magic kingdoms or demon lords. Hope lasted. Community lasted. The choice to protect something bigger than yourself that lasted. Everything else was just details. He was home. That was enough.